So for a software engineer with verified proof, it was for a $5 million offer. The salaries can get pretty insane out there. What's the easiest way to test this out and start collecting data? Our initial product was literally that Google Sheet. Try to make $1 on the internet next week. Can you do that? Because if you can, there's probably something a little bit more there. What I love the most is just being able to ship quickly, just put products in front of people that actually solves like a problem.
Hey Zuhair, welcome to Cloud with Raj podcast. First of all, thanks for taking the time of your busy schedule and come talk to my viewers, but I believe this will be very beneficial to my audience. But first things first, why don't you introduce yourself to my audience and tell folks what is Levels.fyi?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me. My name is Zahair. I'm one of the founders of Levels.fyi. We started the site back in 2017. The way you could think about it is Levels.fyi helps you gather granular compensation data and insight to help you secure your next opportunity. And we try to help you fill in any gaps of information, starting from compensation data to even any benefits that you might want to find, whether you're looking for childcare benefits or a 401k matching program that you want. We help you do kind of like that whole gamut. Our goal is to fill up as many of those gaps as possible.
No, I love it. So I was just telling you off camera, I actually used Levels.fyi before I accepted my offer at AWS. And I have a bunch of students. Whenever they get a job, I always tell them, go look at Levels.fyi before you negotiate and accept the offer. But another thing that I really like about your career path, Zuhair, is like, you are a relatively young chap compared to me. And I was looking at your profile. You went to UC Berkeley. And then you actually created a company named Bash. And then you did a brief stint in Uber as an intern. Then you created another company called Spree in 2017, then Levels.fyi. What motivated you to stay away from the beaten path of joining big tech and instead start something of your own from the get-go?
Yeah, totally. I think Bash was probably one of my first probably my rite of passage into entrepreneurship to some degree. But end of high school, beginning of college, I think what I really was a huge fan of was how little it costs to produce software generally. And you could just do it with a laptop in front of you. You could kind of just do that yourself. And then you could distribute it to the entire rest of the world just through the internet. You didn't have to actually deliver like a physical good. And so because of that, I was really fascinated by that concept, to be honest. I chose to work on a ton of side projects. I think my senior year of high school and just going into college, I was like, okay, what can I make? What can I do for fun? Some of my projects were just super simple, like just a site where you could view all the tech career workshops going on campus at Berkeley. Projects like that I just enjoyed building and seeing people use. And so I want to say Bash was kind of my first, I took a summer out to actually work on this app pretty much full time. And while building it, I learned a lot. And I think I became addicted to that feeling of just, shipping things and just launching like a complete end-to-end product that you had a hand in kind of creating. And looking back, I think we would have tried to be more iterative at that time instead of, I think we were trying to do this thing where we're like, we're like Apple, where we'll build this thing start to finish and then release at the end of like 2 months or 3 months. And that's not really how I operate today. I think some of the things I've learned with Levels.fyi is that, you want to iterate as you go and kind of just be very quick to release and, welcome user feedback as quickly as possible. And so today, if I were to do it again, I think I'd want to kind of follow that approach where I just basically release it as many times as possible to solicit as much feedback as possible from users. But yet, I think all of my experiences, like from Bash to Uber to kind of Spree, like everything kind of helped inform what I did with Levels.fyi after I kind of went full time there. But I think a lot of it is actually just the excitement to build something and having that autonomy to do so. I just want to do it. And a lot of the times the company or the project will come after I had been working on it as a project for a little bit, right?
Did you ever feel pressure from your parents or your peers? Like, I'm sure you went to UC Berkeley, so a lot of your peers went to big tech, right? Did you ever feel,
Yeah.
man, I'm going through all these startups and putting so much sweat equity and burning through cash? Wish
Yeah.
I go to Meta or Amazon or something.
Yeah, no, I absolutely felt a little bit of that. And I think our site is a great gauge for how much you're missing out on not taking that
Yes,
path.
yes.
But, what I love the most is just being able to ship quickly, just put products in front of people that actually solves like a problem. And I felt that I had the best platform to do it autonomously myself through my own companies. And so, I feel that pressure, but I think one of the things that we tried to prioritize with Levels.fyi, earlier on was we were pretty intentional about revenue from a very early point in the company. Even as we were a side project, we were making like, I want to say 5 figures, maybe even like the first year we started the website. I wouldn't even call it a company. It was really just a website with a Google Sheet backend. But I feel like that early revenue gave it a lot of weight because there's something here. We just need to put some more time into it, and we could probably scale this up a lot further. And so to a lot of my friends, I'll say, hey, try to get first revenue as quickly as possible, even if it's $1. Like, try to make $1 on the internet in the next week. Can you do that? Because if you can, there's probably something a little bit more there. You just have to explore it a little further, right? So that, that's what I tell a lot of my friends. And I feel like if you can find a way to make money on the internet, scaling it, there's probably some way to scale it.
No, I love it. And now I'm sure some of your friends are trying to say, hey, Juhair, can I work in levels.fyi, right? So the position has shifted. And I actually love how you think about certain things. As I was going through some of your old podcasts, and you mentioned that one time you just created a website, put a buy button, even though you were not selling, to see if there are enough clicks to gauge the interest before you go build something.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the guys I followed early on Twitter or X, Peter Levels, he's famous right now because he put out this airplane game where he started making like almost 50K plus MRR just from this one game that he's been vibe coding with Cursor or something. But he early on suggested things like this. He was like, hey, just build the thing, put it in front of people. It doesn't matter if it doesn't even work, because that will still give you enough signal as to whether you should build the actual thing. And so, even if you build a broken product, but you get insight into, okay, people actually really want this one thing, you can then reprioritize, hey, we should actually build this instead of that, because the users are basically telling you what to do. Actions are worth more than words. Users will tell you a lot of things, but their actions indicate. Your friends will probably tell you, hey, I'll buy your thing. But do they click on the buy button? That's the ultimate test. I think part of that is also having good instrumentation, analytics, or ways to measure and gauge for that. But I think that's like the most crucial part, basically being able to dissect signal from noise when listening to user feedback.
I love it. Yeah, action, not information, as spoken by Brian Armstrong, right? I also try to do that more. So talking about taking action, let's talk about something that blew my mind. So I'm a cloud architect at AWS. Whenever a customer comes to me, I always like, okay, whiteboard, this is the database, this is the API layer, this is how you scale. Levels.fyi started without any fancy database, and if I believe, with Google Sheets. Talk to me a little bit about it. Why did you select Google Sheet? How did it go? And then we can dive deeper on it.
Yeah, totally. So when we first started the website, the problem we were solving was not related to compensation at all. To paint the picture here, we initially built a site to help compare levels across different companies. And that was independent of compensation information, independent of anything else. It was really just a site where you can see, okay, this is how the levels stack, and this is how they map to each other. And the impetus for that was the problem we were solving there was people would often get down leveled as they switch roles from one company to another. And then some people wouldn't even know what the leveling gradations were at different places because the nomenclature can be proprietary to a company. So what we want to do is like, okay, let's just throw this out into the open, make it completely transparent. These are hidden pockets of knowledge in the industry today, but let's just put it somewhere as a public repository. And so that was the first version of our site. It was just, you could see Google, L3 to L9 or whatever. And then, Microsoft has a completely different structure. Amazon has a slightly more different one as well. And so you could just view it next to each other just to get a rough eyeball sense of, okay, if I'm at this level, I should probably be at SD3 at Amazon, And so that was kind of the first iteration of the site. And then immediately after kind of releasing it, one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got was, hey, you guys should start collecting salaries. You also have the leveling granularity. And the beauty of that, which we didn't realize until we started collecting the data, is that compensation teams internally at companies set compensation bands this way as well. And so we actually start to get more accurate data just because we had the leveling granularity. And so the way we did this, once again, the thing I was saying about validating your ideas, was by creating a Google form, because we're like, wait, what's the easiest way to test this out and start collecting data? So we created a Google form, and naturally with a Google form, it comes with a Google Sheet. And so our initial product was literally that Google Sheet. So when people would click on view data points on our site, it would just take them to that Google Sheet where they can view all of these data points aggregated in one place. And you could literally line by line, row by row, see each of those submissions. We got to a point where it was so much data, we wanted a better interface to even view it, and maybe something a little bit smoother. For example, we had the leveling comparisons. So can we just have you click on like one of those levels and just view like all the aggregated data for that particular company and level? That would make the UX a whole lot better. And so we're like, okay, how can we easily do that? What are some ways we can do that? And we found that the Google Sheet has basically, you can publicly expose the Google Sheet. And I think at the time, I don't know if it's available anymore, you could basically like alter the route at the end and just add like a view.json or something, and it would come as a JSON format. And so we would literally like take that URL from the Google Sheet, tune it on the front end, and basically assemble the data behind all the levels right there so that you can kind of just see it. And then we just put a little bit of an interface on top as well, so you can kind of filter by like different things. But that was the first version. We've iterated. I think we really like to take that approach of start with the skateboard, then the scooter, then build the car kind of thing. And so I want to say that was very much the first version. We started to realize, hey, the Google Sheets is slow. Like it's very slow. The JSON comes, everyone's hitting that same JSON. If you could really just apply some cache to this, it would work some wonders. And so what we started to do is we actually put a Lambda on top of it, where we basically once or a couple times a day, we just consumed all the data and then we put it into this one JSON file that we heavily cached, right? And so people would come to the site, it would be much faster and a little bit easier. Even that JSON file started to get really, really big after some time. And so we started exploring ways that we can even optimize that. So we started doing chunking and different things. But, we got to a point, I think, eventually where we were hitting the limits on Google Sheet itself. So it was like 10 million cells, I think, and we started hitting it. And, as engineers, our first intuition was like, okay, what can we do to extend our lifetime a little bit more? And one of the fun things we did, we ended up actually getting a database. But before that, we were like, okay, let's shard our workspace on Google so that we get the 10 million cells for each workspace that we can kind of use year by year. So for example, we could have 2021 data, 2020 data, 2019 data. And what we ended up doing for the longer term solution was we did end up getting a more official database. So we have a Postgres instance and it's all hosted on RDS. And it doesn't mean we don't have the Google Sheet today. So we actually still do use the Google Sheet. It's more of an interface for us. So our source of truth is now the database. And now what we use the sheet for, and some of the benefits that I love kind of touting is that Google Sheets is basically a plug and play solution to edit and publish data. Right? So even if our database is like the source of truth, we can use the Google Sheet to edit. We can use it to share. We have auth permissions built in just because of the share functionality from Google. Generally, everyone's familiar with it. You can run pivot tables on it. Anything you could do in like with Excel, you can also do on this Google Sheet, and it's like out of the box, right? We didn't have to build anything. We still utilize that on our admin side to kind of edit things. We can take snippets of our data, put it into a sheet, edit it, and then it'll update the database. But now it's not necessarily our source of truth. That's the only difference. But I think the example that I like to give folks with the sheet is that, hey, like start with the cheapest thing to validate your product and your idea. And you can slowly build it up to what you need it to be. I think as a cloud architect, maybe you can have some more input on what we should be doing probably, but that's sort of the story for how it kind of goes.
No, this is great. I think this is the most one-scale use of Google Sheets that Google also did not envision in the beginning. So when you started to migrate the data from Google Sheet to PostgreSQL, like did you also change the source of the JSON to PostgreSQL, or did you still load some of the data to this Google Sheets and then the front end still refer to this sheet?
Yeah, so we started to build APIs to everything. We had like a decent overlap period, right? So we had the database, but we still had the JSON that it was spitting out basically through the Lambda. So it was still going through the database, creating the JSON files. We were consuming it. At one point, we basically cut the JSON file loose because we had the API routes ready, and we basically just started consuming like the end routes directly on the site. Obviously, it came with a lot more additional security, additional like things we could add to the endpoints, like have a lot of things built in that we didn't have before. Obviously, it's much faster. We can cache different queries, not just that one single JSON file. So it came with a lot of benefits, and I think overall we're better now. But I wouldn't say I regret like having a JSON, because it gave us the foundational start and allowed us to move really quickly. And so I think that is really the key piece for us, is like it allowed us to move very fast, right? And get this up and running.
No, I love it. Yeah, so you mentioned that you are using Lambda. So I'm curious, why did not you use DynamoDB to go with the serverless, faster read, and a little bit more cost efficient as well?
Yeah, I think it was just familiarity at the time. I mean, my co-founder, he worked at AWS. He actually worked at AWS Glue
Oh,
up until
nice. Yeah.
2019. He ran a lot of the AWS kind of DevOps side of things. And I feel like he had so much familiarity around just, okay, like I spin up a Lambda for this, and they're like, might as well just do it. And so I think it was just like a familiarity thing. But, I think there's a lot of new technology that we're missing out on right now, to be honest. But we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's working
Yeah.
pretty fine and the usage is growing and you are making revenue, right? So there's always things to do. And you
Right.
said you have no regrets, but I have to ask you anyway as a cloud architect. If you can go back and you have to rebuild levels.fyi, would you follow the same pattern or would you do something different architecturally?
Yeah, I think today the tools out there are much more robust to even just get started with the V1. But I think where we were at the time, given the resources we had, I think I would probably do something similar. Maybe there are small things we could improve on that I know now, but I would still want a quick validation step. And I think what Google Sheets, what I mentioned about it having it out of the box, I think it's just really underrated. Like, even if you were to build, like, let's say you had all the AI tools, you could use Cursor or whatever to spin up your own instance of that. It's just a lot more going into just getting that out there in front of users, even with the tooling and everything available. And I feel like the sheet just allowed us to, hey, like, that's it. Like, it's in front of users. People want it. It's validated now. Now let's go build like a more robust solution. But I do think the AI tools definitely give you an edge today. And I mean, I think there's no better time to be building than right now. And so, obviously I've been toying around with a lot of them. And I think just getting something started is just cheaper and easier than ever before. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest thing my students suffer with is analysis paralysis. I'll tell them, hey, go do this LinkedIn post, and they struggle so much. They want to make it a perfect thing. And
Right.
one thing I really appreciate about you is, like, you said it yourself, build something ugly, ship it. And then you're
Right.
going to learn from it, and then you can iterate. And the more you build, the more confident you will become as well, and the more faster you will iterate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this, exactly like you said, it applies outside of just engineering. Like, pretty much everything you do in life, if you like make it a little bit less formal, like, okay, I'm posting a LinkedIn post, sounds formal or something, like, just make it less formal in your head, and you start doing it every day, maybe twice every day, because you're just like, oh, I'm just posting my thoughts. And I think building that muscle just generally for things allows you to you just get to build on that muscle more, and you basically compound in a way where other people don't get to experience that compounding of, okay, like, you're linking your past ideas now to something else that you want to write about. Or it applies to everything, writing, coding, like everything in life. If you kind of put practice and just make it a more habitual thing, you'll get better at it. That's just how it works. Yeah.
100%. One of my favorite quote is, the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. So I try to do the same. Now, switching to Gen AI, you said you have been playing with Gen AI. Anthropic CEO, Mario, what's his last name? Dario Amodei, right?
Dario,
He just
yeah.
said that in next 3 to 6 months, AI is going to write 90% of the code. And in 12 months, nearly all code may be generated by AI. And Salesforce also stopped hiring software developers for now. So this is a loaded question. Do you think Gen AI will eliminate software engineering jobs?
No, I feel like there's phases to this. Even if 90% of the code is written by Gen AI, they're published by probably some individual. And so I think rather than replacement, these AI tools will augment the existing workforce significantly. And that's why maybe you're starting to see like, okay, smaller teams can certainly do much more. And so maybe teams will not be hiring as much for perhaps engineering. But I do think there's maybe Javon's paradox here at play, which is the idea that increased efficiency can also lead to increased consumption of that thing. And so if it's so easy to produce one line of code, maybe we'll produce a lot more lines of code. And if we produce a ton more code, a ton more software, maybe in the end, we'll actually need more software engineers than before, which is paradoxical to think about, but I think that could actually be true as well. And so I wouldn't be conclusive that like, hey, like software engineer isn't a career anymore or anything. I think a software engineer today can do more than ever before. And thus, to do the things that we do today, maybe you need fewer software engineers, but to do the things that we need to do tomorrow, because there's going to be an explosion of software that supports everything, I think there may actually be an explosion of the field as well. So I also think like, I'm out of my depth to some degree. So we'll just have to wait and see, just like everything else. And I'm using these tools and I think they definitely do deliver on speed and just refining your ideas as well.
Yeah, I mean, coding is so much easier now. I started my career with COBOL in mainframe, and then I did Python. And then at certain point, I was super into video games, and I wanted to be a game developer. And then I started the OpenGL coding and all that stuff in C++. It was so difficult. And the other night, I just sat with like Anthropic code, right? Claude code, and I just did it. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Yeah, no, it's super awesome. It's a really fun time, I will say. Like, if you have an idea, you might as well just try to prompt and one shot something you can share with your friends. I think like, we've been using Cursor at Levels and I've been using Windsurf as well. I've been using all the tools just to see where each one has an edge. More recently, I have tried Claude Code as well. I think I still need some time to play around more with it, but I've heard it's quite good, especially for bigger tasks in existing large code bases. I've heard from a lot of my friends that Claude Code, like I think it's also because of the pricing structure, because I think there's like that incentive to, okay, they will do a good job because you're paying for usage. Whereas, Cursor, Windsurf, some of the other editor tools, like because it's a monthly plan, it's like they're trying to, every query, you kind of limit the commute, like they want to limit how much compute goes behind it. So they're not reading all the files potentially. But that's why I like Claude Code. I want to try it out. I think I need a little bit more time, but it's super exciting, super fun.
Yeah. What are your most used Gen AI tools these days, Zuhair?
Yeah, to be honest, I have Cursor as my editor kind of right now, and I use ChatGPT a whole lot. So I'll occasionally kind of experiment around like, okay, Grok, ChatGPT, DeepSeek. I think there's like this Manus or something that came out recently. I want to sign up.
We have just released DeepSeek in Amazon Bedrock. So you don't have to host it or something. We host it, and it's like dark cheap. It's cheaper than Claude 3.7 Sonnet, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that model is insane. Like I honestly haven't used it for coding specifically. It's more just like used the end consumer products. But even that has been useful. And it's funny, one of my friends actually recently went to China and you can't use any of the other AI things there. So you kind of have to use DeepSeek. So to navigate around, you're basically using DeepSeek. But
so they get a lot of data for free. Yeah.
No, but for me, it's, I think the very classic ChatGPT, like I pretty much just use that I want to give some use cases, ideas, fleshing out ideas just a little bit more. I usually come to AI with something. I think the ideation process should still come from you. But when you come with something, you can refine it very quickly or break it down into like, what are the 3 steps to actually get this out? Or like, what are things I could do? I think the refinement of it is so helpful to have an AI tool kind of help you. I'll chat with ChatGPT to dive deeper on more like interesting insights, or like, let's say I'll give it like a data point from our, from Levels.fi and be like, hey, can you dig into what else recently this company has done or announced? It'll help me formulate interesting posts or things I could post about on LinkedIn. The end product is kind of like a synthesis of me, my thoughts, and then also ChatGPT providing some context. But yeah.
No, I mean, listen, so my wife is a therapist. And she's not tech savvy at all. This Gen AI has permeated to deeper levels when my wife is saying she's using ChatGPT all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And she has replaced Google with ChatGPT. I'm like, okay, so Gen AI
it's happening now.
It's definitely not a fad or hype.
Yeah,
So I have to ask you this, Joahib. What is the highest salary listed for a job in levels.it?
for sure. Yeah, I think so for a software engineer
Mhm.
with verified proof, we had, I think it was a Meta E8 or E9. It was for a $5 million offer. I believe it was like a 3K base, rest of it basically stock. And they submitted proof as well. The salaries can get pretty insane out there. I think one of the more underrated ways that people may not consider all the time, a lot of the salaries that you do see and the ranges that we do provide are for new offers. But if you consider like someone being at a company for some time, for example, Meta, Nvidia, some of the more notorious examples with the stock run in the last few years, you will notice that like, okay, E5s and E6s might make like $500 to $800,000,
Mhm.
but E5s and E6s from 2021 might actually be making even more. Like they're probably millionaires and making
100%.
millions of dollars right now. And that's actually one of the features we want to build into Levels.fi is like projecting an offer data point out to today, if they had kept all their stock, what that would look like, right? And I think it's interesting to see that because it does actually affect the dynamics of a labor market. If someone has millions of dollars of unvested stock, to get them to consider another opportunity, you're going to have to make that offer just as sweet. And I think we're seeing like maybe the AI companies more specifically putting together these offers and packages, but the AI talent wars are definitely heated. And we've seen like, $1 million packages just to unseat someone from one company and bring them over. And yeah, it's very fascinating just to see like how that works. And, having unvested shares is like a huge negotiation tactic and leverage. So if you are in that boat, should not leave unless you're given like a very compelling opportunity.
No, I like it. And yeah, I look forward to this feature as well. And you are right. When I got promoted to principal, I was super excited. And then I went and submitted my data as well to levels.fyi. But after a couple
Yeah,
of years
thanks.
now, I don't
Appreciate
go
it.
and update it, right? So you are
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Like a big piece that's probably need to be built is how is my salary, or people like me who have been there for a little bit, how is my salary changed? Okay, so 5 million is crazy, right? But let's
Mhm.
say the folks who wants to target $500,000 or $1 million, what are
Yeah.
your top tips for them to achieve it?
Yeah, I think the best way to reach that is you want to optimize for joining a high paying
Hmm.
and also high growing company because of the fact that I just mentioned with the stock growth. You
Yeah.
want the stock to grow. You want to believe in the general direction of the company, but you also want someone who pays very well from the start. Otherwise, if you have like a 1K stock grant, that's only going to grow like,
Right.
so much. And so one of our recent analyses that we did,
Mhm.
we actually did this with Gergely. He writes The Pragmatic Engineer, and he originally published this article about how tech compensation tends to be trimodal in Europe. And so we recently applied this with Levels.fyi data, and we found that compensation also tends to be trimodal here. So there's basically 3 tiers of companies that you can kind of think of. There's a lower tier, a middle tier, and then like the highest kind of tier of companies. And so my biggest advice for like getting that, $500,000 package is target that upper end of the middle tier or that high tier of company,
Mm.
because those are the companies that will pay more for even the same role or the same experience. And so you're actually just selecting for basically a company that's willing to compensate that amount. And it actually has very little to, and this is what is like interesting for candidates, is it has very little to do with your actual skill and your actual like role, right? It's more so the company and their value of that role relative to their profitability, relative to their business, right?
Mhm.
And so I think one of the best way to do that is to optimize for basically hopping from the lower tier into the middle to higher tiers. And so if that article is useful, I think we can probably link it
Yeah,
to some of
I'll put
your,
it in the description. Yeah.
I think to touch on the second point a little bit, you generally want to find a company where you can also see growth lifting it up, right? You probably want to join somewhere where AI helping their business use case, not eating up their like margin and
Right.
so just being a little bit forward thinking about, hey, what are the secondary and tertiary, like, the second order effects that are affecting that AI is like affecting, like just thinking about, okay, where do I want to be? What business can benefit a lot from this, and basically use that to kind of, and I don't just mean the AI tailwind. There's a lot of tailwinds that you can
Right.
look at, but I think generally just having that intuition and trying to target that company, like
Mhm.
the company that you want to join. I know not everyone has that luxury, but if you have experience and you are looking for that opportunity, and I think you should be intentional about what you do look for. And that is really our goal actually at Levels.fyi. It's to allow you as a candidate to do the same thing that recruiters do on the other side, which is recruiters go through pages of talent and they're like, okay, like not this person, that person, and they're basically just filtering through. We want you to flip the script as a candidate and go through, oh, this company provides what I want. They pay this like well. So, you basically choose the company that you want to join instead of the company choosing you out of like a pool of talent. And I think the best engineers can do that. The best tech talent can do that. And it does work that way, just under the hood. People kind of reach out to connections or like, hey, like, would you be open for this opportunity? But we want to make that a little bit more open. And I think that's like a nice segue into kind of like some of our upcoming kind of products is like, on the jobs related side. And we want to make this process like a lot more fun for candidates to find where they think will be their next home for their career.
So I'm interested in one data point. I don't know if you collected today. Is there do you know how much percentage of folks who are earning top dollars went to like a TRA college, like Ivy League or tier 2, tier 3? Because I tell my students, like, there are ways, even if you went to not so great college, to make it to these top companies. Do you collect
Yeah.
anything on that, Zuhair, or currently no?
We don't collect institutional level. What we do collect is education level. So we have, okay, if you've completed a bachelor's, master's, PhD, and you'll see the correlation, I think, at the PhD level. Okay, yeah, they're the ones coming in at a higher level, research scientist roles, applied scientist roles. And so you can kind of see that, I think, at the PhD level, it makes sense. But I absolutely agree with you that I think right now the name of the game is experience and demonstrating your value outside of just the traditional job description at a company. And if you're able to basically figure out, hey, like what is it truly that a company needs that like provides value to them, it really doesn't matter what your background is. I think with the tools today, you can actually pick up a lot of the skills quicker than ever before. And so it's really, I think what's lacking is not the actual know-how and the ability to do it, is the willingness to do it. Most people aren't willing to. And so I think if you have that willingness, you're hungry, you have all the tools at your disposal today to kind of go and make that happen. I also think like, I don't mean just the technical knowledge. I also mean the knowledge for seeking those opportunities out and reaching out to the right people and finding ways to kind of put yourself in front of the opportunities that you actually want to get as well.
No, I agree. I often believe that, okay, you're sharpening your saw, which is good, but being good is not enough. You need to prove to recruiters that you are good. So do some, like you said, do some hands-on projects and then showcase them. And then you will get feedback and then iterate on it. And then that's how you get the interview calls.
I was just going to say, like, I can speak from my perspective. Like, if you want to get my attention at Levels.fyi, right?
Yes.
If you build me the feature, like a stock growth feature, or that like something related to our offer detail view, there's very little chance that I won't take notice and at least reply. Right. I would say the same for most people in the industry. If you take the time to build a feature or at least design something that a company is working on or actively thinking about, it's very hard to go unnoticed, because that is what companies are, at least from my experience, hungry for. They want to see that I'm actively working on this thing. I want to know, what ideas could be mixed in there. So yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, just being creative and building stuff to like put out and get in front of the right people.
Yeah. So what's next for Levels.fyi, Zuhair? What cool features you guys are working on right now?
Yeah, I think we're actually working on a ton of new updates on our mobile app. We've been kind of juggling a lot on our website, but I think I'm very excited about our mobile side, where we're starting to bring in a lot of the core functionality that you see on our website today. And I'm also really excited about kind of our growing international presence on the site today. So one of the things that we're working on today is kind of internationalization and just building in kind of language, like basically just language pages and all of the internationalization kind of changes required for like the site-wide. And we did currency just a little while ago, but now we're starting to do language, particularly because of SEO. And I think SEO has been like a really huge growth lever for us. And I think, one of the things we're starting to realize is, hey, we have great reach in the US. We have great reach in actually a lot of English speaking places, but like outside of like just those English speaking places, you look at Europe, you look at like India, like you look at different places. I think what's missing is like us connecting that end, right? Like the end pieces there where you can kind of, view it in your locality, right? Completely. And so we want to build that experience for people. I think that's like one of the next big things for us. I also want to say like one thing that I think is a lot of fun we're working on is we're basically working with a few companies to pilot sending out offers, interactive offers through Levels.fyi. And I think this product will be very cool because you can kind of model a lot of the growth that you might see on the stock side. You get the exact breakdown of like your offer package, how it kind of looks over the 4 years, especially as it relates to some of the vesting schedules we're seeing in the market today. There's a lot of different vesting schedules. Often it's confusing for candidates, but just kind of clarifying that just through, the visual details that we've been able to bring into the Levels.fi main site, but just through like an actual offer letter that companies can even send out. So I'm very excited about kind of rolling that out. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. And we're actually piloting it completely for free. So if there's any companies interested, we're also down to, work with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to check it out myself because sometimes Amazon vesting stuff is complicated, right? So if you are creating something that simplifies it visually, I will definitely use that. You folks also help folks negotiate salary stuff, right?
Yeah.
On
Yeah. Absolutely. So we have two services that we offer. We have a resume review service and a negotiation service. Both of those services, you work with one of our recruiters on our team who's on the other side in their respective companies where they're able to kind of tell you, okay, like I review these resumes or I even give out offers. And so they basically walk you through pretty much end to end the negotiation process. And we even have a guarantee. So if you are unable to actually get an increase in your offer, you actually don't end up paying anything for our service. It's free. We consider it kind of market intelligence to some degree because we know, okay, which companies are hiring, which companies are still like in the market, which companies are not negotiating anymore. But at the same time, you basically get free assistance on kind of your negotiation if you don't get that outcome. If you do get that outcome, we do charge, but we're generally able to increase people's outcomes. And we actually have kind of like this academic study coming out, and hopefully we will be able to announce that soon. But kind of comparing people who went through the study and people who haven't, went through our service, comparing against people who haven't, but maybe have negotiated themselves, just to see what the impact is and the difference.
That's great. I actually did not, I knew you folks help folks negotiate, but I did not know you don't take a cut if they don't get an increase. That's really great.
Yeah, we only want to win.
To try it out.
Yeah, absolutely. We only want to win if you're winning, right? So it's really like we try to keep it as risk-free as possible. And our end goal is to really just get you the highest outcome there as well.
Excellent. Yeah. Zohair, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. So both Twitter and LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn, you'll find me posting a lot of news or just new competition updates. So that's just my first name. I think linkedin.com/in/Zohair. And then on X, it's also my first name, Zohair.
Excellent. Zohair, thanks so much for coming to my podcast and share your wisdom as well as some sneak peek into the upcoming Levels.fi features.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.